Who are we? What are the dominants? The power we wield, it wears away at our very being. It breaks us. It unmakes us. That its immaculate aspect might reveal itself.
2 years on from its very first Awakening trailer, Final Fantasy XVI finally gave us all a release date window, as well as a more in-depth look at the game, its themes, and a first proper glimpse at its gameplay at Sony's recent State of Play. So despite severe delays due to the impact of the pandemic, it looks like we'll be getting the newest installment of the Final Fantasy franchise in summer 2023. But what do we really know so far? What's it all about? Well, don't worry, and buckle up, because we've got you covered. Final Fantasy XVI, first off, seems to be going for a more high fantasy, almost medieval style setting, compared to recent releases like FF15 and the Final Fantasy VII Remake. This world is called Valisthea, and though it's quite beautiful, it's apparently ruled by tyranny and turmoil. Now, Final Fantasy games just love making powerful crystals a major plot point, and 16 carries on that grand tradition. The land of Valisthea is filled with mother crystals, enormous glittering mountains of crystal that look over the realms around them and grant the world with aether. The people of Valisthea flock to these mother crystals, using the aether to conjure magics that let many live comfortable lives. Powerful cities have grown up around each mother crystal, and though many wars have been fought for control of them, an uneasy peace has reigned between the realms now for generations. However, as the story of Final Fantasy XVI begins, that peace is pretty much ended, as the spread of something called the Blight threatens to destroy the entire land. Now, we don't know exactly what the Blight is just yet, but an easy guess would be that it's some sort of sickness. There are 6 main realms of Valisthea: the Grand Duchy of Rosaria, the Holy Empire of Sanbreque, the Kingdom of Wallowed, the Dalmekian Republic, the Iron Kingdom, and the Crystalline Dominion. Now, those are names that just roll off the tongue, right? Each place, we're told, has their own distinct culture and ideology, and it's likely we'll get to see and visit quite a few of them in the final game. Rosaria is where Final Fantasy XVI's main character Clive and his brother Joshua hail from, and the realm draws its aether from Drake's Breath, a mother crystal situated on a volcanic island just off the coast. All of the world's mother crystals, by the way, seem to be named after a part of a drake. Drake's tail is the tallest mother crystal, and the Crystalline Dominion is built around it. Oriflame, the capital of the Holy Empire of Sanbreque, is built around Drake's head. There's also Drake's Spine in the Kingdom of Wallowed and Drake's Fang in the Dalmekian Republic.
What does it matter?
Now, we mentioned that magic was a resource of great power in the world, but the most powerful beings in all of Valisthea are what's known as Eikons. To Final Fantasy fans, these will be more familiar as summons. But if you don't know, these are essentially ultra-powerful elemental beings that can be controlled and called upon to fight alongside you in battle. All of the summons shown so far in Final Fantasy XVI have appeared in other Final Fantasy games. The story or explanation behind summons changes from game to game. Sometimes their presence is never explained or expanded upon, and they're just a handy tool in battles. Other times, they're integral to the story of the game. Final Fantasy XVI is definitely going down the latter route, as Eikons seem to be the most important plot element at play, for several reasons. Unique to Final Fantasy XVI, Eikons are seemingly contained within a single person, known as their Dominant. An Eikon's Dominant can call upon their power at any time, and, it appears, transform directly into that Eikon. The people of Valisthea, depending on their background and where they're from, respond differently to Eikons. Some treat dominance as royalty and admiration or maybe even fear of their power, while other nations either keep dominants captive and force them to serve as weapons of war, or some realms, like the Iron Kingdom, see dominants as unholy abominations, executing any unlucky enough to be born on their lands. We can kind of tell which realms embrace Eikons even now, as some hold them up as their symbol on their official flags. So you can see Phoenix on the flag for Rosaria, for example, and it looks like Odin's Sleipnir in the flag for Wallowwood. It's not definite, but it also looks like that could be Ramu on the Holy Empire of Sandbreek's flag too. Let's talk a little more about Rosaria. As a tradition there, the dominant of the Phoenix, so-called the Icon of Fire, is enthroned as Rosaria's Archduke when they come of age. A role that was meant for our main character Clive, but was passed on to his younger brother Joshua instead, for reasons unknown. Clive Rosefield is the firstborn son of the Archduke, and a talented young knight. So when his brother inherited the Phoenix instead of himself, Clive became a bodyguard for Joshua, while Joshua in turn granted him a part of his Eikon's power, which you can actually see when some of Clive's attacks summon forth a flaming wing.
Dragoons. Imperial Vipers. Do they really mean to invade us?
Clive is actually shown at 2 different ages in the footage we've seen from the game so far. It looks like we first meet him as a young knight, and then there's a bit of a time jump to him becoming a tattooed fighter. Descriptions of the plot of the game hint that Clive, and more tellingly his promising career as his brother's shield, experiences tragedy at the hands of a mysterious dark Eikon, Ifrit, setting him on a dangerous road to revenge. Now, we can maybe guess from that something bad is said to happen to Joshua, or perhaps the realm of Rosaria at large. But there's more going on here. The ending of the Dominance trailer all but confirms a theory that's been going round about Final Fantasy XVI ever since its first unveiling, that Clive himself turns out to be the dominant of Ifrit. The thing is, Ifrit seems to be regarded a bit differently to other Eikons. They're referred to on the official FF16 site as dark and mysterious, so it's perhaps unknown where they come from. Ifrit is also being hunted by another character in the game, Benedicta Harmon, dominant of the wind icon Garuda, who commands Wallowwood's elite intelligencers. There's also the very logo of the game to consider. Final Fantasy XVI's official artwork shows Phoenix and Ifrit locked in battle. It feels like here, the Phoenix represents a cleansing fire of life and rebirth that's celebrated and revered by the people of Rosaria, while Ifrit is a deadly and destructive firestorm, or, more fittingly, hellfire, born out of chaos. Other official artwork for the game also shows an older Clive with an arm partially transformed to look like Ifrit's claw, though this artwork also shows both Ifrit and Phoenix moving in on either side. Could it be that the tragedy he witnesses is his brother's death, and so Clive becomes a dominant to 2 Eikons at once? Other main characters in Final Fantasy XVI include Jill Warwick, a girl born in the fallen Northern Territories, but placed as a ward of Rosaria and so raised alongside Clive and Joshua. Fans have speculated that Jill will become Shiva's dominant at some point in the game, possibly after the time skip that ages Clive. This theory mostly stems from Jill's wardrobe and colour scheme echoing Shiva's, with her wearing a kind of icicle-like diamond pendant around her neck. Plus, Northern Territories usually denote colder temperatures, and what better counter to Clive's inner fire than Final Fantasy's favourite, Ice Queen. Another newly introduced character is the Dhalmekian Republic's permanent economic advisor, Hugo Kupka. He was once a nameless foot soldier in the Republican army, but his awakening as the dominant of the Eikon Titan meant a sudden rise through Dhalmekian politics. He used his new position as the most powerful man in the Republic to exert influence over both the nation's armies and its policy making, earning himself a small fortune in the process. But perhaps there's more to him than money and power. While it seems like with Clive, Jill, Benedicta and Hugo you've got the beginnings of a classic Final Fantasy adventuring party, all of the footage and gameplay we've seen so far points to the suggestion that we only play as Clive. Looking more closely at the newly released gameplay footage, you can use L2 to switch between different icons to wield their unique attacks and powers in battle. Using Garuda will allow you to perform Arrow and an attack called Deadly Embrace, for example, while switching to Titan will give you access to Upheaval, Wind Up, and Titanic Block. It also seems like you can switch Eikon literally mid-combo, which could make for a very flashy and satisfying combat system. Odin gives you attacks like Gungnir, Heaven's Cloud, and Arm of Darkness, while it also means Clive wields Odin's signature lance. So while some Final Fantasy fans may be disappointed that there doesn't seem to be a classic multi-character party system in FF16, it does look like there will be, effectively, the same amount of variation to combat as Clive collects the powers of multiple icons. It'll be interesting to learn what this means for the overall story, however. Will Clive be on the run, or travelling alone the entire time? And how is he collecting the powers of the icons? Do Dominants need to purposefully bless him with their power? Or, more likely, do they need to fight it out first? Because, going by the latest trailer, Icon duels also seem to form an important part of gameplay, and it's a system that could prove incredibly exciting in motion. We see Odin battling Bahamut, Shiva going up against Titan, and Ifrit facing off against several icons. There are going to be some staggeringly epic set pieces in 16, maybe on par with Final Fantasy XV's bigger moments, though hopefully in 16 you won't be so limited in how and when you're able to call upon an icon's strength. Maybe, in fact, that's the practical idea behind Clive only using part of an icon's power to influence his attacks, rather than having to summon these huge beings every time. The development team behind Final Fantasy XVI is also impressive. Producing the game is Naoki Yoshida, or Yoshi P, who headed up the team that completely changed the fate of Final Fantasy XIV, turning it around from pretty much being a flop to a hugely successful MMO. 16's art director, creative director, composer, and character designer all come from that team who worked on 14, which will be very reassuring to fans familiar with just how popular and successful 14's turnaround has been. And directing the combat of Final Fantasy XVI is Ryota Suzuki, who worked on the combat direction for both Devil May Cry 5 and Dragon's Dogma. Now, that's a pretty great lineage for 16 to have. In our latest trailer, we've introduced several new icons, as well as provided a more detailed peek at our action-packed battle system and the freedom it gives players. 16's director Hiroshi Takai told the PlayStation official blog. As for development progress, I'm happy to announce that the game is fully playable from start to finish, though from optimization to brush-up there is still a mountain of challenges to tackle as we head into our final push. Until then, please stay tuned. That the game is already fully playable from start to finish is huge news. Overall, of course, we've still seen very little of Final Fantasy XVI so far, and while at first it honestly seemed a little bogged down by convoluted plot elements like warring kingdoms and giant crystals, the central story about powerful beings taking control of everyday people, turning them into living gods / weapons in the eyes of others, is pretty intriguing. The summons of Final Fantasy have always been one of the most appealing elements of those games for me, so it's exciting to see them take center stage here. But what do you think of FF16 so far? Do you have any predictions as to where the story will go? Shout them out in the comments, because we will definitely be covering more Final Fantasy XVI as we find out more about it. Make sure to subscribe, and thanks for watching. Bye!